Anastasia Glazkova from Keller Williams to the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, first podcast?
Yes, actually, I've been thinking about doing one of these for a while, and here I am.
Well, let's get you started then.
Perfect. Let's do it.
So obviously the purpose of the Secret Life of CEOs is to dive deep with local business owners about their business, right? Like why you decided to do this, what actually caused you to get into whatever industry that you're in, and, you know, the rest of your life story from there, right? In a short form.
Yeah. Not going to stay here for 3 hours.
No. I've known you long enough. That could absolutely happen, but not today. We'll have to do a 3-parter if we need to do that.
That's fine.
So we'll start with, so obviously you're working for Keller Williams, and you have since I've known you.
Yep.
Which is like, what, 5 or 6 years now?
It's going to be 7 this October.
That you've worked with Keller, and
Yeah.
I've known you probably for like 4
Yep.
or 5.
Yep.
So talk to us about, like, well, why did you get into this industry? Like, why did you decide to work for yourself? Like, what happened?
Why did I decide to work for myself? I think I've always been an entrepreneur. Even if I think back to my childhood, I used to tell my parents that I was going to go and sell my toys because I wanted cucumbers. So as a 3-year-old, I told them I'm going to gather all my toys and go to the market and sell my toys so I could get the cucumbers that I wanted. So I think that's kind of a natural progression for me. My background is
Cucumbers to houses.
Cucumbers.
I don't know about that,
I'm not
but-
going to tell you what the second thing was because most people look at me like I'm crazy. But, those were my 2 obsessions when I was a kid. And I used to love garlic too. So it's just, I was a weird kid, okay? So, being from a restaurant industry background and working on different levels in that industry, from starting off as a server, then progressing to bartender, manager, opening locations. I've always known that I like to work for myself, and I think anywhere that I worked, I kind of worked up to the point where I was dictating my schedule. So obviously it was kind of just a smooth transition into working for myself. Why did I choose this industry? I don't know. I kind of stumbled upon it. I used to watch, a lot of shows about houses and stuff like that, and it looked glamorous, which is nothing like it. Absolutely nothing like it. And with my, strong communication skills and strong customer service skills, I figured, why don't I give it a try? And here I am almost 7 years later. So
obviously it's working out if you're still in it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely always looking to grow and get into other industries and other opportunities. And I think real estate is such a great industry where you get to meet people that can give you that next step or can show you the path that you would like to take. And especially with Keller Williams, we have so many different opportunities within the company itself that it's not just, being a realtor. You can go into management, you can go into leadership, and we have a lot of education on things like that, and it's helped me grow as a person, definitely.
That's awesome. I don't think you hear that much on the back end of the real estate industry.
I don't think so. And, I think that what people don't really know about real estate is that it's not just me going to open a door for you. You know what I mean? There's a lot more things that are involved, and if you like to stay on top in the industry, you really do need to take education. And I take a lot of classes, probably every month or every so often I take a course or I take, a bigger, either a seminar or something else, or a bigger course. Like we have BOLD, which is Business Objective Life by Design, which is a 8-week course, and it's not just sales, it's growth and it's personal development. And that's pretty much why I stayed with Keller Williams, I think. Because as an entrepreneur, you always are looking to grow yourself and to see that you don't want to be the same person that you were yesterday.
Right.
That kind of makes you pretty much stagnant. So as a business owner, I think it's important to just keep growing, and Keller Williams definitely allows me for that.
That's great. So 7 years in, what would it look like 10 years? Like 10 more years?
10 more years. Oh,
like,
God.
do you think so? With all these opportunities, right? Like with all these legit open doors, right?
Yeah.
Other people in your company can offer, well, the company that you've partnered with to run your own business, right? And if you were to look ahead on what that potentially could look like for you, you're like, oh, I'm growing. I want to keep moving forward. Well, what does that look like?
You know, I keep asking myself that question over and over again, and ever since I became a mom, my life completely changed and my priorities shifted. So, what 10 years used to look like for me is not what 10 years looks like for me now. And I'm still on a journey of figuring that out, to be honest with you, because I think every time I ask myself that question, I don't really exactly have a clear vision just yet. Used to be that I was going to have a big team. You know, I would probably partner with other agents in different parts of the country, open up satellite offices, something like that. Would I want to do that now? I'm not sure. So I'm kind of in a process of just figuring out where it is that I want to go next. So right now I have what I have. It's great. I'm looking into a couple of different things because everything going so much into tech. And everything is being online and, you know, apps and all that kind of stuff. And the industry is changing dramatically. You know, I don't think we will ever not have a need for a real estate agent. I just do think that things are going to look very different. And right now, if you listen to a lot of news about things, you know, there's a very confusing message. What we do know, it's all about data and it's all about, you know, cloud and all that stuff. So I think my next step would probably be something along those lines and learning more about that, so that
within the real estate,
right? If and when,
industry?
if I do stay in the real estate industry, you know, I have a leg up and like learn new things and new things and new things that I can bring to my clients. If not, then going into something in tech a little bit more and just learning more about that. I stumbled upon something the other day, and I'm kind of interested in its UX design. And because the skills that I've learned in real estate, you know, marketing and doing flyers and open houses and the experiences that we give to people, if I can take that skill and transfer it into, you know, more of a tech industry and still have real estate on the side, I think maybe that's where 10 years down the road is going to be.
Interesting. And I'm assuming doing it for yourself.
Yes,
to a degree, right?
To a degree. I think I will always stay an entrepreneur, just because I'm just not a person to work for somebody for a long time. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No,
it's
there's
just,
not.
I always tend to outgrow things or places that I work.
You outpace everything very fast.
And then I just become bored and I become stagnant. So a way to eliminate that is just to work for myself and to push myself to new heights and do new things.
Right. So with that in mind, you know, what if somebody in, let's say, 17 years, you've been in the real estate business to some degree, and somebody asks you, you know, Anastasia, I want to get into, you know, real estate, finance, whatever it is, what advice would you give them?
Well, the advice that I would give them is to really figure out what is it that they want out of life. You know, I think the industry doesn't really matter. I think asking yourself the question, where do you want to be in 10 years? You know, how do you see your life? What's important to you? What values do you have? And then kind of backtracking from that, because knowing where you want to go is pretty much the roadmap of how you can get there. But without knowing that, you're not going to be able to really get there. So whatever industry you're thinking of going into, my first advice would be to sit down, figure out how do you want your life to look like in 3, 5, 10 years down the road. What do you see, you know, where do you see yourself? How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself working for somebody else? Do you see yourself working for yourself? You know, and figuring that out and then deciding wherever you want to go. Because the sky is the limit.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Now, what would you say with that advice? So these are things that you've learned, obviously, during, you know, your journey. What else have you felt has been imperative in your transition? So we talk about, I like to ask people their feelings about being in this area, right? Like, I am solely responsible for my future at this point, right? Like, how does it feel now versus, you know, when you started 7 years ago, and how would you apply that into like an advice piece that you would give someone?
That's a good question. I think being responsible for your future gives you a lot more control. because what I have friends who work for corporations. I have friends who work for small businesses, and I have friends who work for themselves. The one difference that I see is when you work for yourself, you get to control what you do. You get to control what outcomes you have. The one thing you are in control of is what happens based on your actions. In a corporate environment, that doesn't exist. Today you could have a job. Tomorrow, the company is acquired and you lost your job.
Right.
So, in my opinion, and that's just my sole opinion, I feel like working for yourself is more stable. Yes, it comes with a lot more responsibility, yet you have more control. I think it gives me anxiety to work for a company and not know where my future is, because you can be promised so many things and tomorrow everything changes and you no longer have that. And the safety net, the 401k and all that kind of stuff, to me, I don't think that's safe.
Well, that's not the only thing, right? I mean,
right.
I think control is an interesting term, and it's a trait that I think entrepreneurs really thrive in. That's why it's hard to get them off, the stubborn pedestal of like, you got to delegate and you got to hire people and you got to have a support team, right? Because you want to be in control of all these pieces. Now, I think this is an interesting point also to talk about. Your thoughts about your future have changed since becoming a mom. And I think we have listeners for sure, like, myself included, obviously, that are moms and, we own a business. And I think sometimes people that are not in business, they just have no understanding of what exactly goes on day to day.
Oh, yeah.
And having that opportunity for flexibility, but it's not like, oh, well, I only worked 3 hours today. It's like, well, I only worked 3 hours during the day.
Right.
That doesn't mean I didn't work, after hours, right? So I want to hear your take on, since becoming a mom, how has that changed how you do business? And put that out there for people who maybe are parents now and they're like, oh, I can never own a business because I have kids. I have young kids.
Well, so, the way it changed how I do business, everything changed about the way I do business. When I was single and living alone, I had all the time in the world. I could do whatever I wanted. You know what I mean? I could get up at 5. I could get up at 8. I could get up at 10. I could go anywhere I wanted to go, do anything that I wanted to do. Now my life has to be structured, and there's something to be said about having structure in your life, because I think it actually makes things easier by knowing what you're supposed to do. Because as a mom, as you know yourself, like, you have things that you have to do every day.
Right.
They will never change. You are a mom forever, until probably your kid leaves the house.
Right.
But until then, it's...
When and if.
When and if, exactly. Hopefully. No, I'm kidding. There are certain things, especially with young kids, there's a lot that goes into it, and your life does become about your kids. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just business becomes more of an organized thing as to before, where you had the flexibility. So with having a younger kid, to me personally, there's a lot of guilt.
when you're working
when
during
I'm working,
the day or away from your kid,
because he's very attached to me. So dealing with that, I think emotionally, it's a lot more to have a business when you're a mom. And you just have to build structure in. But it's very possible to have a business. It's very possible to have a successful career. You will always lose on something. There is no work-life balance. If, let's say I'm doing showings at night, I'm missing bedtime. If I have bedtime, then I might be missing on work. It's all about figuring out, what's important to you in that moment and what you need to do, and just going from there.
Yeah, and there's no playbook.
There's no playbook, because every day is different. Your kid could be sleeping one night and going through a streak like we're going right now, where for a month straight he's not sleeping. So you have to work around that. And I think, in any job, even whether you're working for an employer or whether you're working for yourself, I don't think it really changes in that aspect as far as doing the work, because the work is always going to be there.
Yeah.
It's just more learning the new life that you're, and this role that you're supposed to be, which no one prepares you for.
No, and I think the other thing that's interesting about like the world that we live in, and I think this especially is true for women, is someone has predetermined our roles for us, right? And it's like, okay, well, you're a woman, so that means you're a mom. It doesn't mean you can't have a career, but it's like they're not in any sort of, not necessarily harm. I think harmony is the wrong word, but they're not working with each other at all, right?
No. And it's funny you mentioned that, because society looks at women, oh, you're a mom, so you must be like staying at home. But if you're staying at home, oh, you must not have any control, or you're working, oh, so you must not care about your kids. Right. It's like, when does it stop?
Yeah, it doesn't.
How much pressure are we supposed to be like have on ourselves? Yeah. When does it stop? It's, and I think as you become a mom, you learn you can't make everybody happy. Right. The one person you need to make happy is yourself. Because if you're not the best version of yourself, you can't be the best version for your kid, for your family, for your friends, for your business. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think, being more aware, and I've talked about this on the show too, you have to be very self-aware, right, about these things, and knowing, okay, I did too much today, or I did too little, I'm going to focus on my mom duties today, I'll get back to my work stuff later. And there's not an equal balance every time. It's a teeter-totter. Trying to figure out, okay, where's my attention based on what's needed, and as our kids get older, the attention changes. But that doesn't mean we want to be there any less.
Exactly.
And it is very hard when people are like, oh, well, you must be nice to,
nice,
not have to be around your kids. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I like to be around my kids. Right. But I also want my kid to be independent, and I also want her to see, like, oh, her mom's doing different things and building things, and it's not just, her dad or her stepdad doing those things. So, yeah, it's very hard, and kudos to every mom and dad out there doing it.
It's crazy because, you look at life so differently. Even during pregnancy, like, it's not the same. You know what I mean? Once that baby's born, it's like your world flips upside down. Mm-hmm. And you realize how much more there is to life, business, everything. Just life is just different. And I think it's challenging to explain it to people who don't have kids. But sometimes it's also challenging with people who do and view it differently, just because there's so much pressure. Mm-hmm. Whether you have kids or not, as a woman especially, like, do you have kids? Do you not have kids? Do you do this? Do you not do this? It's like, my God.
Yeah, you can never have the best of both worlds.
No.
And that was something that, when I had my daughter, when my first kid came, I was like, I'm not going to sacrifice one for the other. There is no reason why I can't do both. I just need to make sure I have supports in place in order to accomplish that, right? And I think a lot of, I would say more women so than men, and obviously that's just my opinion, don't have the support that they need in order to be able to accomplish that. So sometimes they may feel, well, I have to make that sacrifice. I have to only be the stay-at-home parent, or I'm only the one that works because
this is what I have to do.
This is what I have to do, right? I'm not getting the support I need to do some of these other things. And there's nothing against being a stay-at-home parent. Like, if that's what you want to do, that's totally fine. But if you want to have a working career, I don't think there's anything wrong with that either.
I think I think it boils down to really sitting down and being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
The pressure is always going to be there. Putting that pressure aside and sitting down, like I said, and asking yourself the hard questions, the questions that sometimes you don't want to answer. But it starts with self-awareness. It starts with being honest with yourself about what it is that you want out of life. Because if you're forced into a stay-at-home role and that's not what you want, well, you're not going to be happy when, your child goes to school. What do you have? Right. So, yes, sometimes people are forced in those situations. And I think even in that situation, if you're brave enough, because it becomes it takes courage to admit those things and to sit down with the pen and paper or however you process things, and put it out there and realize what it is that you want. Because yes, your life really does change. Your priority changes, everything changes. So it starts with honesty with yourself, self-awareness, and then asking yourself those hard questions.
Yeah.
And not letting society pressure you into anything.
Yeah, I mean, not just society, like our friends, family, coworkers,
everybody
who say like, well, this is how I did it. You can do the same thing.
Or like your mom's like, well, this is what I used to do. I'm great. That was 35 years ago.
Yeah,
I love you. That was 35 years ago. Things have changed.
Yeah, things are a little different now.
Just a little bit.
Just a little more expensive. Yeah. And I think that's a good, I would consider that other piece's advice, right? Especially for people who are in the parent realm or thinking about being in the parent realm and just like, well, I don't know if I want to do that because it might sacrifice my career. And I think it even, at least for me, it almost like lit the fire, right? Like, I'm not going to let having a kid stop me from doing all these other things. And I feel like I have something that my kids can be proud of too. Right. Exactly. That I was able to accomplish these things.
Exactly. So, well, I think that once you have a kid, you become a role model. And when you think about it, what do you want your kid to see?
Right. Who do you want your kid to see?
Exactly. And it circles back to being the best version of yourself, because if you're not, then they don't see the best version of who you can be, you know, and I analyze my own childhood and look at things that I've seen. And I think about what is it that I want my son to see, and what not mistakes, but, challenges that I could potentially go through, and how I would handle them a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. It's the more you live, the more you learn. Right.
But I think that perspective is what's important, right? Mm-hmm. Like that self-awareness, that internal dialogue of like, how am I always going to be better so that I can be better for, my spouse, my friends, my family, my team, my clients, my kids. And everybody in between.
And I think that's what's different about our generation, to be honest with you. I think our generation, we start asking those questions. I think previous generations, it was a little bit different, and expectations were a little bit different. The way things were different. Yeah. And I think that, us now, the young professionals, younger mothers, and people especially who are in business, we tend to start to look at things differently and ask those questions. Whether or not our parents did that, I don't know, but I think it's becoming more normal to talk about those things, and, to take your mental health into consideration and your happiness into consideration, and not just go with the flow. Right.
Yeah, just deal with that type of mentality. And I think, I don't think our parents had the opportunity to even think about those things, because it was never
talked about. It was like a taboo. You couldn't talk about it. Like, people didn't talk about their problems. People didn't share, the vulnerability pieces about their lives. Yeah. And, I don't know if, just like Brene Brown says, vulnerability is not a bad thing. Right. It's something that you need to have in order to grow. Mm-hmm. So, back in the day, none of that was talked about. Right. And that's why we came from a generation where, like, well, you just stuff it out. It's not like
But, like, what if I don't have to?
Why do I have to force myself to tough it out if I can find a different way?
I don't like it.
I don't like this. I don't want to be stuck in a box. Why are you putting me in a box?
Right.
Let me live.
Yeah, we have choices. I think just knowing that we have choices and opportunity and being able to take advantage of those things. Yeah. But it takes, a special kind of person to do that. I mean, I think our generation might be asking questions, but not everybody's willing to make the change.
Absolutely.
Or put the effort in to do whatever it is that they want to do and go down that different path, because it's hard. It's challenging, right? Like, I don't know if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, I don't know what I was thinking.
Yeah. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, whoo, what is happening? Or I lay there awake at night. All right, well, what do we do next? But I think, we have so much at our fingertips. Things like this, the podcasts like that. It's great that we get to talk about things like that, or have the internet where you can research things and have books and Audible and all these things and resources. We have a lot more resources than ever before. Yeah. Which can be great and confusing at the same time.
I think the access is nice, but it's definitely confusing, because you can find
a ton of things on the same subject. It's like, do I go baby-led weaning? Do I do cry it out method? Do I do this? Do I do that? And
everyone's like yes.
And and everybody at the same time, yes, this is what we do. Okay, great, fantastic. So which one do I do? Where do I go from here?
Just pick one. Just try it. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think this is a good point to like end our show, because I know we obviously could could
Yeah,
carry on for
absolutely.
an eternity here, especially on this subject. But I think it was great to hear about your journey and, you know, especially the points about being a mom, business owner, right? And I think there's a lot of not just women, but men out there that maybe are interested in having a career that they take ownership of, right? They're not just working for somebody else, and maybe they're not sure, like, you know, where to start or how to think about those things. So I think you offered some great points on that. I'd love to see where you're at, you know, a year from now, especially if you've made some of those decisions, like, you know, where you kind of want to go, you know, personally and professionally, and how that baby-led weaning is going for you.
Yeah,
you decided to do that?
Well, no, so we're past that. We've made
That's
those
true.
hard decisions. Now we transition him into a bed. So that's our new thing that we're working on.
So we'll talk about the bed next time.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
see
he
how that's
sleeps
going.
on the floor. So that's good. No, he's getting a hang of it, but, you know, there's going to be new things where he's going to be going to school and, you know, and where I go. I'm excited. I think it's been a challenging journey from, you know, finding out that I was pregnant and so many moving parts that happened.
Yeah.
And I'm finally kind of putting myself back on that path. And again, starting with the same thing that as you took as my advice, is just asking those questions.
Yeah.
What do I want to do? Where do I see myself going? How do I see my life looking? How do I want my son to look, you know, at me, and what impressions do I want him to kind of take from that? What values do I want to instill in him?
Yeah.
And just thinking about all of that and deciding what to do.
Well, we will want to hear about that. So
Perfect.
I hope you'll come back on the show.
Absolutely.
At least for the second time.
This was fun.
If you don't do any other podcasts, you can come back on our show. But thank you so much for coming. Thanks for being here. And thanks for sharing everything with us.
Thank you so much for having me. You're awesome. I love
Thanks.
you.